my friends, to a journey not just through time, but through the very fabric of what it means to be human. As a writer, a student of history, and a keen observer of the scientific narrative, I've often found myself drawn to the whispers of our most ancient ancestors, echoes that resound from depths beyond our immediate comprehension, telling tales of survival, struggle, and an evolution etched in blood and bone. This isn't merely an academic exercise. It's an exploration into the primal fears and triumphs that shaped us, a deep dive into the very definition of mortality from a time when the world was raw, untamed, and infinitely dangerous. Imagine, if you will, a world devoid of the comforting hum of civilization, where the rustle of leaves could signify either a gentle breeze or the approach of a hungry predator. For millions of years before we ascended to the precarious apex of the food chain, our ancestors lived in a constant, visceral dance with death. Their very existence was a testament to resilience, a continuous negotiation with forces both seen and unseen. We often conceptualize our early history through the lens of emerging intelligence, the crafting of tools, or the first flickers of social complexity. But beneath all of that, woven into the very fabric of their daily lives, was the omnipresent shadow of the end. Death, in those primordial days, wasn't an abstract concept. It was a tangible threat, a sudden cessation that could come with the swiftness of a leopard's pounce or the silent, chilling descent of an eagle. Consider, for a moment, the vast span of time we are discussing. We are not speaking of centuries, nor even millennia, but epochs. Millions of years where our distant relatives, the hominins, navigated a landscape teeming with creatures far larger, stronger, and swifter than themselves. Their survival was not a given. It was a hard-won victory, day after arduous day. The archaeological record, though fragmented, offers chilling glimpses into this ancient reality. It speaks of broken skulls with puncture wounds, of bones bearing the unmistakable marks of claws and fangs, of the unceremonious scattering of remains that tell a story of a hunt gone wrong. Wrong. These aren't just fossils. They are poignant narratives of individual lives, brutally cut short, yet incredibly significant in the grand tapestry of human evolution. Each mark, each fracture, is a testament to a world where survival was a daily miracle, and where death was often swift, brutal, and unceremonious. One of the most striking and oldest examples of this primal struggle takes us to the sun-baked plains of South Africa, a land rich with the skeletal secrets of our deep past. Here, researchers unearthed a fossil, catalogued as specimen SK54, a small skull cap belonging to a juvenile Paranthropus robustus. This fragile relic, dating back approximately 1.5 million years, tells a story so vivid, so visceral, that it sends a shiver down the spine. The skull bears two small, perfectly round holes. To the untrained eye, they might seem innocuous, mere imperfections. But to the seasoned paleoanthropologist, they whisper a chilling truth. These holes, meticulously studied and analyzed, align with uncanny precision to the lower canine teeth of an ancient leopard. Imagine the scene: a young hominin, perhaps separated from its group, caught unawares, its brief life extinguished in a single powerful bite. The leopard, just like its modern descendants, would have then dragged its prey up into the branches of a tree, securing its meal from scavengers below. Dr. C.K. Brain, a pioneering South African paleoanthropologist, meticulously reconstructed this ancient drama in the 1970s, demonstrating with remarkable clarity how the spacing and morphology of the leopard's teeth perfectly matched the fatal punctures on SK54. It's a stark reminder that before we wielded fire and tools to dominate our environment, we were merely another link in a very unforgiving food chain, often finding ourselves at the vulnerable end. But the threats weren't confined to the ground. The very air above held its own dangers. A sky that could suddenly darken not with clouds, but with the shadow of a feathered predator. Another celebrated South African fossil, the Taung Child, provides compelling evidence of this aerial menace. This remarkable specimen, the skull of a 3-year-old Australopithecus africanus who lived approximately 2.3 million years ago, appears to have fallen victim to an eagle or another large bird of prey. Researchers examining the Taung Child skull identified a series of puncture marks and distinctive depression fractures strikingly similar to those found on the skulls of modern primates killed by eagles. It paints a terrifying picture: a young, unsuspecting hominin, perhaps playing at the edge of a clearing, suddenly snatched from above, its life ending in a violent, swift aerial assault. This discovery underscores a critical point. Our early ancestors were not only vulnerable to the formidable beasts that roamed the land, but also to the silent, swift hunters that soared through the skies. This omnipresent threat of predation, from both terrestrial and aerial sources, was a relentless evolutionary pressure. It wasn't just a matter of avoiding danger. It was a force that profoundly shaped our development. The constant need for vigilance, the imperative to seek safety in numbers, the burgeoning capacity for alarm calls and coordinated defense. These were all survival adaptations, forged in the crucible of predation. It drove the very beginnings of social bonding, the rudimentary forms of cooperative behavior, and undoubtedly the nascent development of sophisticated tools that could offer a modicum of protection. These were the foundational lessons, etched in fear and loss, that would ultimately define our species, propelling us towards a future where we would eventually reverse the roles. Yet, as our ancestors steadily evolved, their ingenuity flowering with each passing epoch, a profound shift began to unfold in the landscape of survival. The roar of the saber-toothed cat, the silent pounce of the leopard, the terrifying swoop of a giant eagle. These primal fears, though never entirely vanishing, gradually receded from their place as the primary concern. Our burgeoning intellect, our increasing mastery of tools, and our growing ability to cooperate in ever more complex ways began to tilt the scales, slowly but surely, in our favor against the natural predators that had long stalked us. We learned to hunt more effectively, to build shelters, to harness fire, creating islands of safety in a perilous world. Yet, as one shadow began to diminish, another, far more insidious, began to lengthen. By approximately 10,000 years ago, a paradoxical and chilling truth emerged. The most dangerous animal a human could encounter was, increasingly, another human. This shift marks a pivotal, disturbing turning point in our history. It speaks to something deeply ingrained within our species, a capacity for organized aggression that would manifest in increasingly complex and devastating ways. For centuries, the prevailing view among scholars held that large-scale, organized warfare, the kind that pits one group against another with lethal intent, was a relatively recent invention, emerging primarily with the advent of agriculture, settled communities, and the accumulation of wealth. The logic was seemingly sound. With farms came fixed territories to defend. With stored surpluses came resources worth fighting over. And with growing populations came the necessity for more structured conflict resolution, or indeed, engagement. But the archaeological spades, digging deep into the ancient earth, began to unearth narratives that powerfully challenged this comfortable assumption, revealing a far grimmier and older truth about human violence. One of the most profoundly unsettling discoveries that reshaped our understanding of prehistoric violence came from the shores of what was once a vast, ancient lake in Kenya, Lake Turkana. Here, at a place now known as Nataruk, a team of archaeologists from Cambridge University, led by Dr. Marta Mirazon-Lar, unearthed something truly remarkable and horrifying. They uncovered the scattered remains of 27 individuals, a haunting collection that included men, women, and tragically, at least 6 children. What made this find so extraordinary, so utterly compelling, was the unequivocal, brutal evidence of violent death etched upon their bones. This wasn't merely a site where people had died. It was a tableau of prehistoric massacre. Dr. Lar, whose team published their groundbreaking findings in the prestigious journal Nature in 2016, described the injuries they meticulously documented as shocking in their mercilessness. Imagine the scene as the layers of earth were carefully peeled back, revealing these ancient victims. Of the 12 relatively complete skeletons they could analyze, a staggering 10 showed unmistakable signs of a violent, premeditated end. The evidence was stark, chilling, and undeniable. Skulls, once cradling minds filled with thoughts and dreams, were found crushed by blunt force, their delicate structures fractured and shattered. Limbs, once strong and purposeful, were broken in multiple places, indicating savage blows. And most tellingly, projectile points, tiny lethal shards of obsidian or flint, were found still embedded within the victim's bones, silent witnesses to the final fatal wounds. One man was discovered with a gleaming obsidian blade, a weapon of exquisite craftsmanship and deadly intent, still lodged chillingly in his skull, a grim exclamation point to his final moments. Perhaps most heartbreakingly, 4 individuals, including a woman in the late stages of pregnancy, bore evidence suggesting their hands had been bound before death, rendering them utterly helpless in their last moments. The sheer brutality of the attack was overwhelming. Victims at Nataruk suffered extreme trauma to their heads and faces. Their hands and knees were broken, and arrows had pierced their necks and chests. This wasn't a chaotic, disorganized skirmish. The attacks appeared systematic, thorough, almost clinical in their execution. And adding to the chilling narrative, there was no apparent attempt to bury the dead afterward. Their bodies were simply left to the elements, a stark testament to the ferocity of the assault. The profound significance of Nataruk lies precisely in how it shatters those long-held traditional views about the origins of organized warfare. These were hunter-gatherers, living a nomadic or semi-nomadic existence. They had no cities to defend, no vast tracts of farmland to protect, no obvious stockpiles of wealth, no gold, no elaborate pottery, no fixed settlements to signify material possessions worth fighting for in the way later agricultural societies would. Yet, the evidence unequivocally shows they engaged in coordinated violence against another human group. This was not a spontaneous individual act of aggression. This was a planned, brutal assault, suggesting a level of organization and intent that belied their supposed simple hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Professor Robert Foley, a co-author of the Nataruk study and a respected voice in human evolutionary studies, suggests that this violence might reflect something far more fundamental about human nature. A duality, perhaps. He posits that the capacity for lethal aggression, this willingness to inflict mortal harm upon our own kind, likely evolved alongside our capacity for cooperation and altruism. It's a sobering thought. The very traits that allow us to build societies, to care for one another, might share a deep evolutionary root with our darker impulses. The attackers at Nataruk employed a range of weaponry, indicating a strategic approach. They used weapons not typically carried during hunting or fishing expeditions, suggesting they were specifically armed for combat. The attack combined the lethal efficiency of distance weapons, like arrows, with the brutal intimacy of close-range weapons, such as clubs and stone knives. This combination speaks volumes about planning and coordination, implying a deliberate intent to maximize harm and ensure the elimination of the opposing group. But why would one group of hunter-gatherers attack another with such brutal efficiency? The researchers proposed two compelling possibilities. The first centers on resources. The Nataruk location, with its abundant fresh water and rich food resources, would have been a highly coveted territory, a literal oasis in what could be a harsh landscape. Such a prime location might have been deemed worth fighting for, a resource so vital that securing it, even through extreme violence, was a strategic imperative. The second possibility is perhaps even more disturbing in its simplicity, that such violence might simply have been a common, perhaps even default, response when different groups of early humans encountered each other. In a world with no established laws, no formal diplomacy, and limited avenues for peaceful resolution, lethal aggression might have been an all too frequent outcome of intergroup encounters, a brutal way to establish dominance, secure resources, or eliminate perceived threats. While Nataruk represents a single horrific moment of extreme violence, a snapshot in time, other archaeological sites across the globe further reinforce the unsettling notion that such brutality was far from isolated. Indeed, the narrative of human-on-human violence only deepens as we delve further into the archaeological record. As the disturbing narrative from Nataruk began to reshape our understanding of early human conflict, challenging the romanticized notion of a purely peaceful prehistoric past, archaeologists continued to unearth even older, and perhaps more disturbing, evidence of human-on-human violence. This evidence suggests that such brutality was not merely an isolated incident or a rare aberration, but rather a persistent and deeply ingrained facet of human existence, a constant shadow that stretched back far earlier than previously imagined. We move now, even earlier in time, to a region that is now modern-day Sudan, where archaeological discoveries paint a chilling picture of violence as a pervasive way of life. Discovered in the 1960s during extensive archaeological salvage work, a race against time to excavate before the monumental construction of the Aswan High Dam forever submerged countless ancient sites, the cemetery at Jebel Sahaba stands as one of the earliest and most poignant records of widespread deadly conflict. Dating back a staggering 13,400 years, this site predates Nataruk by thousands of years, pushing the timeline of organized violence far deeper into the past. The cemetery contained the remains of 61 individuals, a mix of men, women, and tragically, children. When archaeologist Fred Wendorf first excavated the site, he immediately noticed clear and undeniable signs of violence etched upon the bones. There were broken bones, fractured skulls, and most tellingly stone projectiles, tiny lethal points of flint or obsidian, either still embedded within the victim's bones or lying ominously near their bodies, silent witnesses to their final moments. Initially, Wendorf interpreted the site as evidence of a single devastating battle or a catastrophic massacre, a moment of extreme, widespread violence that claimed the lives of an entire community. It was a harrowing thought, a snapshot of ancient horror. However, recent reanalysis of the Jebel Sahaba remains, undertaken by a meticulous team led by Isabelle Crevecoeur and published in Scientific Reports in 2021, has unveiled a different, perhaps even more unsettling, scenario. Their detailed study meticulously cataloged over 100 previously undocumented lesions on the bones, both healed and unhealed. This distinction between healed and fresh trauma proved to be profoundly significant. Approximately 25% of the skeletons exhibited both healed and fresh wounds. This critical detail changed everything. It indicated that these individuals had not simply been caught in a single, devastating event. They had survived previous violent encounters, bearing the scars of past battles, only to be killed in subsequent attacks. Rather than a single cataclysmic event, the evidence now strongly suggests that the people of Jebel Sahaba experienced persistent, recurrent violence over a prolonged period. The pattern that emerged from Crevecoeur's reanalysis reveals a community living under constant threat of raids and ambushes, where death came not all at once in a grand battle, but through a grinding, relentless series of attacks. Imagine the psychological toll of such an existence. Always vigilant, always wary, always expecting the next assault. Christopher Nuzzel, a physical anthropologist at the University of Bordeaux, notes that these findings powerfully challenge earlier views that organized warfare was a modern invention, a product of settled agriculture and complex societies. The people of Jebel Sahaba were hunter-gatherers, living during a period of major climate change at the very end of the last ice age. This era was characterized by significant environmental shifts, which would have undoubtedly increased competition for scarce resources like food, water, and prime hunting grounds. Such heightened competition could have fueled the kind of pervasive, low-level conflict evident at Jebel Sahaba, making violence not an exception, but a grim rule of daily life. The pattern of organized violence, once established, continued its devastating march through human history, evolving and adapting to new environments and social structures. We can trace its grim trajectory forward thousands of years, even across vast oceans, finding evidence that resource competition and territorial disputes remain lethal drivers of conflict well into more recent prehistory. One of the most extensive and chilling prehistoric massacres ever documented in North America provides a stark example. This takes us to the Crow Creek site in what is now South Dakota, dating to approximately 1325 CEI. The Crow Creek site, strategically located along the Missouri River, was home to a large, thriving village of the initial coalescent culture, ancestors of the Arikara people. What sets this site apart, even before the discovery of its ultimate tragedy, is the presence of a formidable fortification ditch surrounding the settlement. This detail speaks volumes. These people already lived with the palpable threat of attack, building defenses to protect themselves from an ever-present danger. In 1978, archaeologists made a horrifying discovery. Human remains were eroding from the very fortification ditch itself. After receiving respectful permission from the tribal council to excavate, they uncovered the skeletal remains of at least 486 individuals, all of whom had been killed in a single, devastating attack. The evidence of violence at Crow Creek was unmistakable, graphic, and deeply disturbing. Many skulls bore the telltale signs of scalping, a brutal act of dehumanization and triumph. There were numerous cases of dismemberment, with hands and feet severed, and skulls separated from bodies, indicating an extreme level of brutality and perhaps a desire to desecrate the dead. According to the archaeological evidence, men, women, and children were all victims of the attack, demonstrating a complete disregard for age or gender. This was total warfare, aimed at the annihilation of an entire community. The scale of the Crow Creek massacre is truly staggering, a chilling testament to the extreme lengths to which human conflict could escalate, even in societies without the complex state structures typically associated with mass violence. As human societies grew more complex, as populations expanded and resources became more contested, so too did our methods of killing. From the chaotic, desperate group violence evident at earlier sites, a more calculated, perhaps even ritualized, form of deadly aggression began to emerge. This evolution in violence tells us even more about how our ancestors viewed life, death, and indeed, a nascent concept of justice or retribution. As human societies continued their inexorable march towards greater complexity, the nature of violence, tragically, also evolved. No longer confined to the desperate, chaotic skirmishes of hunter-gatherers, or the relentless, grinding ambushes of communities under constant threat, killing began to take on a more deliberate, even ritualistic dimension. This shift speaks to a growing capacity for social organization, a chilling ability to plan, execute, and even derive meaning from the act of taking human life in a controlled, systematic manner. It's a somber reflection of our growing cognitive abilities, twisted towards a darker purpose. We see evidence of this chilling new calculus in sites that reveal not just massacres, but something akin to execution. One such profoundly disturbing site, offering a stark glimpse into this organized cruelty, is the Halberstadt site in Germany. Dating to approximately 7,000 years ago, during the early Neolithic period, a time when agriculture was firmly establishing itself in Europe, leading to more settled communities and potentially new forms of social hierarchy. This site reveals a picture of systematic, organized killing unlike anything seen before. Archaeologists uncovered a mass grave containing the remains of 9 individuals, 8 young adult males and 1 young adult woman. While mass graves are not uncommon in the archaeological record of violence, what makes Halberstadt truly extraordinary? According to archaeologist Christian Meyer, who published his findings in Nature Communications in 2018, is the precise pattern of injuries. Unlike other Neolithic massacre sites, where wounds appear randomly scattered, indicative of frenzied combat or desperate, chaotic raids, the Halberstadt victims show trauma almost exclusively to the back of the head. This isn't the haphazard impact of a brawl. It's a chillingly consistent pattern, strongly suggesting a deliberate, controlled method of killing. These weren't victims caught in the heat of battle, nor were they overwhelmed in a chaotic raid. The archaeological evidence paints a very specific and disturbing scenario. The victims were subdued, perhaps kneeling or bound, and then methodically executed, one by one. Imagine the grim procession, the chilling silence broken only by the rhythmic thud of blows. After death, their bodies were unceremoniously dumped together in a burial pit, their limbs tangled in a jumbled mass, a stark contrast to the careful, often ritualized arrangements typical of Neolithic graves. This lack of respect for the dead, the absence of funerary rites, further underscores the nature of their demise. These were not revered community members, but rather victims disposed of. But the story of Halberstadt goes even deeper, revealing a crucial detail through the marvel of modern scientific analysis. Isotope analysis, a technique that examines the chemical composition of bones to reveal dietary and geographic origins, provided a profound insight. These people were outsiders. They were not locals, not members of the community where they were found. They were brought to Halberstadt as captives, transported from other regions. This discovery is pivotal. It strongly suggests an organized system of prisoner taking and ritual killing that transcended local conflict, indicating a broader, perhaps regional, network of power dynamics and violence. The Halberstadt executions represent the earliest clear evidence of systematic execution in human history. By 7,000 years ago, humans had already developed the social organization, the cold calculation, and the capacity for controlled group violence necessary to carry out such methodical acts. This marked a significant and terrifying milestone in the evolution of human conflict. It shows a growing sophistication in our capacity for cruelty, moving beyond mere survival or resource acquisition to a more calculated, perhaps even punitive, form of violence. Yet, while massacres and executions, with their chilling scale and horror, rightly capture our attention, reminding us of humanity's darker capacities, prehistoric death often came in more intimate, personal forms. The archaeological record, in its remarkable depth, preserves these individual stories of survival, suffering, and eventual demise, reminding us that each skeleton represents not just evidence, but a life lived, a unique human experience cut short by the harsh realities of the ancient world. These singular tales, often overlooked in the grand narrative of migrations and conflicts, offer poignant glimpses into the daily struggles and resilience of our ancient ancestors. Consider the remarkable discovery at Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq, a site famous for its Neanderthal remains. Here, archaeologists unearthed the skeleton of an elderly Neanderthal man, dating back approximately 45,000 years. Known as Shanidar I, this individual presents a truly compelling story of prolonged suffering and profound community care. His skeleton tells a tale of incredible hardship. He had sustained a crushing injury to his skull, an impact so severe it likely caused blindness in one eye. His right arm was withered and had been amputated above the elbow, perhaps due to a severe injury or congenital defect. He also suffered from debilitating arthritis, visible in his joints, and other injuries that would have rendered him severely disabled in a world that demanded physical prowess for survival. Despite these devastating injuries and disabilities, the skeletal analysis clearly shows that Shanidar I survived for many years after incurring them. This astonishing longevity, in such a physically demanding environment, suggests something truly profound about his community. They cared for him. They provided food, protection, and support, enabling him to live long past the point where an unassisted individual with his injuries would have perished. His eventual death, and the careful way his body was interred, indicate both the brutal harshness of prehistoric life, where such disabilities would have been a constant challenge, and, perhaps more importantly, the deep compassion and social bonds that existed even in those difficult times. It's a powerful counterpoint to the narratives of violence, reminding us of the capacity for empathy and altruism that has always been a part of the human story. The spectrum of ancient human mortality extends far beyond the dramatic narratives of violence and predation. While the brutal encounters at Nataruk, Jebel Sahaba, and Crow Creek, or the chilling methodical executions at Halberstadt, capture our imaginations with their stark reflections of human aggression, the archaeological record is equally rich with quieter, more personal tragedies. These individual stories of death, often from disease, accidents, or the sheer grinding hardship of existence, remind us of the multifaceted challenges our ancestors faced, and in so doing, they forge a deep connection between their struggles and our own vulnerability. They bring us face to face with the universal experience of being human, a journey fraught with both triumph and tribulation, extending back millions of years. In another truly remarkable case, researchers examining a 400,000-year-old Homo heidelbergensis skull from Kabwe, Zambia, often referred to as Broken Hill or Rhodesian Man, uncovered compelling evidence that this individual likely died from severe tooth decay and a subsequent agonizing gum disease. The skull clearly displays multiple large cavities and abscesses that had eaten away at the jawbone, indicating a long-standing and debilitating infection. This level of dental disease, particularly for a prehistoric human, was highly unusual. The diets of early humans were typically coarse, consisting of wild plants and meat, with far less sugar than modern diets. The severity of the infection suggests immense pain and difficulty eating, which could have led to malnutrition and eventually a systemic infection that proved fatal in a world without antibiotics or modern dental care. It's a poignant reminder that even the smallest, seemingly innocuous ailments could escalate into life-threatening conditions in the ancient world, highlighting the fragility of life and the ever-present threat of unseen enemies, the bacteria and infections that lurked in every wound and cavity. Then there's the unique and intriguing case from East Africa, approximately 1.7 million years ago, where a woman known by her specimen numbered ANA 188 met an extraordinary and rare end: vitamin A poisoning. Her skeleton exhibits abnormal bone growth, a telltale sign of hypervitaminosis A, particularly pronounced on her arms and legs. This condition is strikingly similar to what is observed in modern humans who consume toxic levels of vitamin A. How could an early hominin, living a hunter-gatherer existence, acquire such a dangerously high dose of a vitamin, usually found in much smaller quantities in natural? Researchers speculate that she might have consumed the liver of a large carnivore, such as a leopard or a lion. The livers of apex predators can accumulate exceptionally high concentrations of vitamin A, far beyond what is safe for human consumption, making them a lethal meal. It's a compelling hypothesis, suggesting a momentary lapse in judgment, an act of desperation, or perhaps a simple lack of knowledge about the hidden dangers within their food sources. This discovery beautifully illustrates the intricate relationship between ancient humans and their environment, where even the act of scavenging or hunting could carry unforeseen, fatal risks. These individual cases, each a silent, powerful narrative preserved in bone, collectively remind us that while violence was undeniably a significant and often brutal part of prehistoric life, it was far from the only cause of death. Disease, accidents, environmental hazards, and a myriad of other misfortunes also claimed countless lives. The archaeological record, with its painstaking precision, preserves these personal tragedies alongside the larger-scale events, offering us precious glimpses into individual human experiences across vast stretches of time. It allows us to humanize our distant ancestors, to see them not just as scientific specimens, but as beings who experienced pain, fear, compassion, and the universal fragility of life. By studying the most brutal, the most poignant, and even the most mundane deaths from our distant past, we gain profound insight, not just into how people died, but crucially, into how they lived. We begin to understand what they valued, perhaps the safety of the group, the strategic importance of a water source, the bonds of family. We comprehend the challenges they faced, the ever-present threat of predators, the insidious march of disease, the unforgiving nature of a changing climate, the inherent dangers of their own kind. In their struggles, their moments of triumph, and their ultimate tragedies, we can recognize something undeniably familiar, something deeply resonant within ourselves. Their ancient stories, etched into the very earth, connect us across the vast expanse of time to the shared, continuous experience of being human. Even in our darkest chapters, even in the most brutal records of ancient mortality, these narratives remind us that we are all part of a single, unbroken human journey. A journey that stretches back millions of years into the prehistory of our species, forever bound by the fundamental realities of life and of death. It's a story that continues to unfold, one bone, one tool, one whisper at a time. And as long as we keep listening, we keep learning about ourselves. What do you think about these ancient stories? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into the depths of human history.